Good morning, this is Bowdee, January 2nd, 2018. Today is my first podcast after doing a little bit of testing on my laptop to see if the microphone was going to be clear enough without purchasing a separate one. I decided, you know what, this is pretty good. Let's just go ahead and do it. The main thing is to get it done. So today I want to talk about starting your own business from scratch. This is something that I aspired to do. I tried once and failed. I aspired to do again, and I tried again, and the second time was a success. I did pretty good in my estimation. So I wanted to kind of break down the steps that I took to do those things, what I learned, what I didn't learn soon enough, and go from there. So finding work was one thing, and I was doing whatever came to me. The first job I did was installing laminate flooring, something I had never done before. I had not even done hardwood flooring before, but I knew I had the carpentry skills to do it. I read trade journals constantly. I was a subscriber to the Journal of Light Construction and Fine Home Building, and I just devoured those magazines whenever I would get them. I loved learning more about construction, seeing the pictures, seeing the plans, and seeing the whole process and details laid out. And to this day, I still save all my construction journals. If I ever have a job that comes up, I can thumb through those and see what it is I need to do that job, and it just helps me to get the process, which I feel is very important. Understanding the process, which is pretty much why I'm sharing this video of sharing the process of what it takes to start your own business from scratch. So you have to know your trade. You have to be excellent in your trade. So I did the job. That led to another job, working on a giant pole barn for an indoor horse riding arena, and then that led to more work with another builder guy, other friends from church that were remodeling a pole barn, and I did a stairway for them and some kitchen cabinet and countertop installs in their pole barn, which was going to be used for like youth group activities, and just met a whole bunch of wonderful people. It was a really good experience. It was a great time in my life. I was very excited and looking forward to each day and getting involved and living outside of myself with purpose, and it was good stuff. I continued to meet new people. I continued to meet other builders. I kept looking for jobs in the paper of people that needed help. I was trying to it was tough to stay in the mindset of this, I want to build a business and have it be my own. It was really easy to slip back into the mindset of I want to find a job working for somebody. So throughout my career, I've really bounced back and forth. I've taken jobs with companies multiple times, and then went out on my own and tried it, and then went back to taking job with companies, and then went out on my own again, tried it, and did better. And so there's pros and cons to all of it, but it just kind of goes to show that you have to learn what you need to learn before you can really go all the way with it. Oh, sorry, that was my 8:15 alarm. So where was I? Okay, yeah, so my first jobs were whatever jobs I could find, working for people at church, and I still had the mentality of wanting to find employers, and so I found some builders that needed some work done, and just like I bounced back and forth from doing one job so my first jobs were whatever jobs I could find, and then that would lead to meeting somebody that wanted more work done, which would kind of end up with me having an employer. Case in point, I met a builder who had me install cabinets and he also needed a deck built. And it was through meeting him that I realized that those were the two things I wanted to specialize in my business. But he was building a whole house, and then he found out that I could do siding. I ended up doing siding on the whole house as well. And then that went well. That relationship had gone good. So then he wanted to hire me to only work for him. So I did that, and he had enough work for a while. You know, he was doing houses, and he had us do a pretty good sized custom pole barn, and got to lay that all out from scratch and do the foundation for it in the way that he wanted. Got to use some Kubota heavy equipment, but also met some guys that became lifelong friends that you know, got to share in the experience. And I've noticed that along my path I'll have apprentices come into my life that I'll get to help teach carpentry and share the knowledge, and this is also an extension of that. I want the learning to be available to people that are trying to further themselves and acquire more. So it was a continual bouncing around, trying to, you know, just find the right type of work that I like to do. And then I wasn't really building the business once I got too comfortable in one spot, because I would go from I'm running the business and gonna be in charge of what I do to now I'm working for somebody else and they have the vision of what they want to do and where they want to go, and I'm kind of along helping them. I've realized that in my life a lot of times I fall into that number two role of somebody that's running a business, and they have the vision and I'm like their main man. I'm the number two guy that just supports what they do. And I fell into that because I think that's what I enjoyed. I learned dealing with customers and doing the business side of it wasn't necessarily my favorite. I really loved the trade side of it. I loved the skills part, being able to work with tools and work with the materials, work with my hands and create and make something awesome, and, you know, try to do my best and put my heart and soul into it. And that did nothing but make my boss happy, or whoever I was working for, whether it was a customer directly or whether it was a builder who had the customer. They would make the customer happy too. So, you know, it was a humongous learning curve to try to learn everything about business by just jumping in with both feet. But that's what I did, and it worked. But not the first time. When I started that business in Grand Ledge, I went from working for people at church to working for builders in the city, and then eventually, you know, I had a new to me pretty nice construction truck that I took a loan out on. It was the most expensive truck I had ever owned at that point. It was a $14,000 loan for this 95 GMC 1-ton dually with 11-foot steel toolboxes and a heavy-duty ladder rack and a Boss V-plow in the front. So I also found some side work doing subcontracting for a landscaping company doing snow plowing. Now, I had this humongous truck that was awesome for snow plowing, and I put it to work. I got a great contract, and I was doing an awesome job, and I was making good money. I was making $65 an hour plowing snow, and it was a dream come true. In a lot of ways, I still wish I was doing that, because I really enjoyed it. It was fun, and when you're having fun, you know you're getting close to where you need to be. So I was finding what I love to do, and I was doing, you know, making good money doing it. But you know, plowing snow is seasonal. You can only do it for a little while, and then you got to go back to whatever else you were doing to make money. So I was still going on my first attempt to start my own business. I had found some builders to be a subcontractor to, I had found a landscaping company to be a subcontractor to, and I learned that to live that number two role, subcontracting is the way to go. You don't have all of the stress of trying to find the customers to fulfill, to keep your schedule full. If I went to a builder, he already had the customers coming in, and he needed help getting the work done, and that's where I excelled. So that's kind of where I naturally ended up leaning towards subcontracting. The pitfalls to that was when you'd find somebody, do some work for them, and you really like them, and they like you, and they see what you're capable of, and they would want to, hire you exclusively, and then I would be unknowingly jumping ship from running my business to, being an employee for them if I chose to go that route. You got to stay in the mindset of you're going to subcontract for many different people. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, because if that one ship goes down, then you're going down with it. So just through, I guess I started going to trade shows at one point, and just wanting to continue the yellow book mentality of I'm just going to start calling people and meeting people, and then something will happen. So instead of just looking up people in the phone book that were builders that I knew I needed to meet because they had to work, then I realized they're at trade shows, so I'll go to trade shows and talk to people. And it was through there that I met a very influential guy in my building career that was running a deck business. And he had this awesome pergola set up, and then the name of his business was Custom-Built Decks. And at that time, I could hardly believe that there was a business that would be just focused on building decks. I thought that was so cool. So I talked with him. We hit it off. He needed some work done. He was starting to get more busy than he could handle. It was pretty much just him and his wife running the business at that time. I don't know if he had any laborers working for him, probably, but I was his first lead carpenter that he hired, in the mindset of I need to get out of the field and start focusing on my business, is what his mindset was. And he wanted to get somebody highly skilled and competent that he could put in the field to take care of the job. And that was me. I was the man for that. And again, I was making $20 an hour. I was on top of the world. That was the most money I'd ever made. That was just awesome. And I showed up on the first job, and Mike, the owner, was there, and he helped me kind of get going for the first half an hour, and then he just left me on the job. We're talking, this was a really nice house, probably the nicest house I ever been to at this point. Maybe not $1 million house, but in a subdivision in the higher end parts of Lansing, that it was just really nice. And actually the deck had cement pillars with glass rails. To this day, I've only done maybe 2 glass rail decks, but that was the only one between cement pillars. And if you know anything about cement and glass, they don't bend very well, so to try to get glass in between 2 concrete pillars, I was baffled on how that was going to work. But there was another crew of guys that was going to be coming in to do that part, so we just had to concentrate on installing the composite deck. This was a type of composite decking I'd never used before. I think it was called Evolve, and they actually ended up having some warranty issues with that product. It was real plasticky. It was susceptible to melting, and you might have seen this before, where vinyl siding on a house, if you have in the back of the house, you have the slider, and sometimes if there's bends or juts in the wall where it bumps out, how a grill too close to your vinyl siding can melt it. Well, light reflecting off of a sliding glass door onto the siding can melt it as well, and we found that it was doing that to our decking. So Anyway, we got the deck installed great, and later on we had some warranty work and got it changed out, and that was great. But we learned about working with inferior products. It wasn't Evolved. It was Eon. 8:30 alarm. Sorry. No, I'm not. But anyhow, gotta keep on track, boy. So after everything went well that first deck, and I was hired as the lead carpenter, and I found out that I was really good at doing stairs, and that a lot of carpenters don't know how to do stairs. It's kind of a higher end skill. That was when I first started realizing that maybe I am kind of a higher end carpenter, and I can share what I know with other people. So, and I enjoyed it, so that was just a natural fit. That we went on to do deck after deck, porch after porch, all around Lansing area in Michigan, and I had guys working under me. There was a time when we did a whole subdivision of porches. We were the porch contractor for every house that would come into there, and so we did other decks too. But whenever we had a break in our schedule, we would know that we always had backup work at this subdivision where we can go and build the porches. And so if I needed any tools, the builder just bought them for me. He had brand new compressors, brand new generators, brand new nail guns, all dropped off at the job site, and I got to load it up in my truck. At the end of the day, I had a F-150 with a construction topper, locking ARE topper on top, and I'm going to work and coming home with a whole truck full of tools all of a sudden. I didn't have to save up and buy them. I just, boom, here's what you need to do the job. And that was the mentality of working for the deck company of, you need more laborers to help you do these decks. How many guys do you want? 1, 2, 3. Sometimes on work doing these porches, we would knock out an entire porch in one day, but there would be 4 of us, sometimes 5. Me and the owner were the lead carpenters, and we would have 2 to 4 guys that are carpenters working underneath of us. Occasionally 3 carpenters and a laborer. Most of the guys that we had were carpenters because they had to know how to cut and know the process, and it wasn't like you were just shoveling stone all the time. We had to have guys that knew what they were doing, could operate tools safely. And so I was just given that. I was given what I needed. I was given the plans for the job. I was given the address, the customer's name and phone number, and I was given the tools, the materials, which would cost thousands of dollars. That's the builder's job to pay for that and have it delivered. It would get dropped on site. I would be in charge of communicating with the homeowner to figure out where we need to put those materials and what the best plan of action was going to be scheduling wise, but just get the job done. That was my job, and I loved it and did awesome with it. And over the few years that I worked for them, it was custom built decks and finished basements, and we did finished basements in the winter, which was great because building decks in the winter is possible, and we did do that. But it's nice to get inside and do a little interior work as well. And as a deck builder, you're a framer when you're framing it, but when you deck it and do the railing, it's more of a trim carpenter because you have to be, your tolerances are a lot closer when you do the railing and the trim. And we were working with high-end products like cedar, which is expensive, so you don't want to make mistakes when you're cutting it. You want to utilize the material properly with the least amount of waste that you can and produce a good product. So we bought premium product. We had to figure out which suppliers were the best suppliers for the types of materials that we need, and which ones can bring out the Moffett off-road forklift and drop the whole bunk right exactly where we need it, instead of just dumping it out of the back of a large dump truck. So going through that process, again, I had unknowingly kind of shifted out of the running my own business mindset and into the you're working for a business. And so I wasn't building my brand, I was building the Custom Built Decks brand. And that was fine because I loved the brand. I loved the way Mike, the owner, was. I loved the way he treated me. I loved the way he operated his business. He was a Christian man of integrity, but he was also charismatic, and he was very jovial, and just being around him was lively and fun. He was working with him even was great, you know. We really hit it off, and I just enjoyed promoting his brand. And you know, we had t-shirts and sweatshirts, and we'd go to trade shows, and you know, we'd set up that same pergola that I first saw him at a trade show. I was the one setting it up, and I would get paid on the weekends to go stand in this booth and talk to people about decks and get lead forms filled out, because you know, they had a process, and part of the process was you take people's information and then you get back to them. But it wasn't like work. I was just talking to people about construction, which was something that I was awesome at, and I knew about it, and they looked at me as if I was an expert, and you know, compared to them I was, but I'm by no means that I know everything about building decks. I just got a job with a deck building company, so I was still learning. There was so much to learn, and I learned a ton from working for that company. And it was, you know, I was living in Lansing and working in Lansing, not so hard, right? Well, my wife got to the end of, she was going into med school at Michigan State. She got to the end of the 2 years of book learning that you do on campus, and now it was time for the 2 years of, it's not an apprenticeship, but they call it a internship. So she needed to do an internship where you're still going to college, you're paying the college, but you are working with doctors, and you go from doctor to doctor to doctor and see what their life is like, see what it is they do, and learn about them. And every month she would switch jobs and go work with a different doctor. So it kind of got to be our running joke that, you know, you can do anything for 30 days, because she was constantly starting a new job every 30 days. And you know, it's an intense way of learning, but it gets the job done. So for her to do this internship, we moved back to the Grand Rapids area on the west side. We were found a brand new house in Jenison. So we're living in a brand new house, renting it. It was a former landlord that we knew. It was a spec house he built. He couldn't sell it because this was back in 2003-ish, and the market was not good for selling houses. I learned then that building decks, we were staying busy. Even though the construction industry as a whole was not doing that well, I learned that people that have money are willing to spend it. And so you just have to get in front of the people that have the money. If you want to build custom high-end decks, chances are your market is people that have higher end houses. And so, you know, it wasn't no big thing for people to spend $20,000 on a deck in that market, and we stayed busy. So now I have this good job that I love, but we are relocating to Jenison over by Grand Rapids, and I tried to find work over in Grand Rapids area as a trim carpenter, and about the only thing I could find was $12 an hour. I was already, you know, felt like I was doing pretty good at 20. I kind of liked it. So I decided that I was going to commute. So for 2 years, an hour and 20 minutes one way, I commuted from Jenison to Lansing. I would leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would get to at this point, Mike had moved out of his house, and now he was running a business in a shop. So I would get to the shop at like 6:40, and then I would either take my truck or I would take his truck and trailer full of tools, depending on the job we were doing and how many tools we needed. And I would take that to the job site and be to the job site by 7. We worked till 5, and then I would get back to the shop around 5:30, and then hour and 20 minutes home. And it was at this time, that's a lot of time commuting, and I had to do something to fill my time. So I was already into audiobooks, or it was right around that time that I found audiobooks, books on cassette, books on tape. And you could get them at the library, so I would just, go to the library and rent them and listen to 2 or 3 a week. And that was my own learning process, and it was a way to keep my mind busy. And I don't know, it's just part of my learning style. I've always loved listening to biographies, learning about other people's life and how they live their life. And so anyway, I stuck it out with the deck company for those couple years and continued to learn as much as I could. But I realized I'm not really working for myself. I'm not in control of what jobs I want to do. I love decks. I love finished basements, but it's getting a little repetitious. I kind of feel like I got it, and I was getting bored. And that's kind of a sign that you're ready to learn something new, when you're getting bored. So I decided I wanted to do my own thing, and I made a decision. Part of me making that decision was a growing process where I was so committed to expanding the Custom Built brand that I wanted to start a branch of it over in Grand Rapids. And it was a lofty goal, but I was working for somebody that was not afraid to go for it. That Mike was a real go-getter. He was the one that taught me the importance of getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning and getting after it. He was that example for me. So he had business cards made up for Bowdee, the owner or the operator of the Grand Rapids branch, and I had to try to find suppliers, and he helped me try to find jobs. And in the end, that part didn't really take off, and it didn't really work, but it did spawn the desire to want to do more jobs locally. I was getting burnout on the hour and 20-minute one-way commute. My daughter, at this point I had a daughter, so it was after 2004, and I was only seeing her from 7 to 8 at night, because I would leave in the morning before she'd wake up, and then I'd get home at like 7 o'clock at night. And that was my life. I wouldn't have it any other way. I have been a very hard worker at points in my life, and I know that hard work will move you forward. But I wasn't running my own business again, and that was kind of, I think I skipped a little bit, but the way that went down was, I moved to Grand Ledge and tried to start my own business, and I had a big fancy construction truck with a loan, and I did a little bit of work, but in the end it wasn't consistent. So if you don't have money coming in consistently and you got payments going out, you start to get tense. And so anyway, I ended up selling the construction truck and taking a factory job, and that was an automotive factory job, actually. UAW, go figure, in Lansing, Michigan you can find a UAW job building cars. But that was a great experience too. That was an awesome job. I mean, I was meeting new people and learning new things, getting to work with high technology, and it was really cool. I had left that not by my own choosing, but we were building the Chevy SSR convertible pickup truck. That was only a 4-year run. It was like a $42,000, $45,000 vehicle, very expensive at that time, and was really heavy, steel body. So even with a Corvette motor, it wasn't really that fast and awesome. So they didn't sell a ton of them, and they ended up shutting her down. So I left that job, was on unemployment for a while, and then I had to start finding my own work again, and so then I ended up going back into construction and ended up at Custom Built Decks. So the kind of the way that went was, my first business attempt, and then a factory job, and then working for a construction business. I wasn't 1099. I was a W-2 employee of Custom Built. So at that point, I was not running my own business. I wasn't a subcontractor, although I had seen Mike hire some subcontractors when we got really busy, because now we were running 2 crews and sometimes bringing on subs, and it was so cool because I got to see the process of what it takes to build a business. When I got hired with Mike, he was a one-man show working out of his house, and in a couple years, he had a shop and he was running several crews. He had advertising all over the place. I mean, he was the job site sign king. At some point we ended up doing flyers. We would flyer 5 or 6 houses on either side of the job we were doing, and leave job site signs in the yard so people know who did the job when we left and they know who to call. We were doing trade shows in the spring and getting a dozen jobs to get the season going on a solid foot at the beginning of every year, and it was just really good stuff. So I learned a lot. I'm thankful for Mike and what he shared with me. And then to this day, he's still going on excelling. Now he's the president of the Home Builders Association in Michigan, or the vice president, one of them. And so he's continued to strive and reach excellence, and he has what it takes to do it. So it's been a learning curve, a learning process. And so as I tried to find more work on my own, I had to really refine what it is I'm looking to do. I had to figure out what it is I'm good at, what pays the most, what do I love doing, what's gonna be the least amount of tools. I guess now that's kind of where I am with the construction industry. Is my back has been abused and used, and I want to think about what I can do that requires the least amount of heavy lifting. I can still use my tools, but I don't look forward to spending a half an hour hauling them out of the truck in the morning and then another half an hour at the end of the day putting them back in the truck. Different ways of doing it can be easier on you. If you use a job site trailer, then you can just roll everything into the trailer on a dolly and not have to lift it as much. So there's ways to minimize that. I got into trim carpentry actually, because that's, if you're doing a house, you unload your tools once. You put them in the house, and then you may have to move them room to room, but maybe not. Maybe you'll be set up in that same house, until you're done in that same spot. But sometimes there'll be multiple carpenters working. There's been times where we'll have a floor. You'll do the upstairs and I'll do the main floor. And so, a table saw stand, a miter saw, and a miter saw stand, those things are heavy and you gotta get them to where you need. But once you get them there, you can be done, and then boom, your tools stay there until you're done with the job. And that to me was awesome. Trim carpentry was the more highly detailed part of it, so I enjoyed that the most. It's on the inside of the house, so everybody sees it. It can really affect the quality and feel of the house depending on the type of trim you use. It's challenging, so I love trim carpentry. I excelled at that, so I kind of evolved from the rough framing and doing the deck part to just doing trim carpentry. But cabinet installation was another area. I really just loved doing that, so I decided what I wanted to focus on. I wanted to focus on cabinet installation, trim carpentry, and custom decks. And those decisions were what led me to my second business attempt, in Cincinnati and my success. So I was still living in Michigan. I was married to a soon-to-be doctor. She had done med school. She'd done her internship, and now it was time for her residency. The residency was going to require moving. That was part of the process. The way they did the residency was it was a match program where you submit your top 3 places where you want to go, and then they will match you to a place that needs somebody like you. So I knew that we were going to need to move, but we needed to pick the program that she wanted to go to, and we needed to pick basically the state we wanted to live in. So we had it narrowed down to Lexington, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio, and Indianapolis, Indiana. Those had the programs, number one, that my wife was interested in, and the programs had the city, and the city was my market, and so I started researching my markets. In the end, we got Cincinnati, and so I moved to Cincinnati. Again, I'd started trying to find work as a trim carpenter, but I could only find $12 an hour jobs. I had been used to $20 an hour for many years at this point, so I decided, just like that, it wasn't I want to start my own business. It's I can't find a job doing what I'm already doing, making the same amount that I'm already making, so I'm going to start my own business. And I made that decision, and I already knew what I wanted to focus on: cabinet installation, trim carpentry, and custom decks. And I just made it happen. I had a neighbor that was a banker. He got me set up with a business line of credit, so I had the money that I needed, so I didn't have to feel like money is holding me back. I can just figure out what it is I need to do, focus on that, and do it. And I succeeded. My second business attempt was a success. I made a profit my very first year, and it was a 7-year journey that ended in disaster with getting a divorce and abandoning the business and moving back home to Michigan. But I had many years of success and many stories, and I am wanting to relate these to you. So that's why I share this. I want to share some of the things I learned, and hopefully you can get some use out of it. So thanks for listening.